Hello friends, today we are going to form lab regarding 802.1 authentication. In this lab, we are going to use three different networks. In this highlighted portion belongs to the NOC, where we have a radius server, we have an administrator, and the related network devices, switch, and the router. And we have two different networks on some other side. Say you can say that we have two different remote sites with networks 192.168.20.0/20 and 24 and 192.168.30.0/24. In this scenario, we are going to authenticate our PC4 and PC5 via radius server by using 802.1x authentication. Let's start our configuration. First, we will configure our radius server. Here we have the radius server. We will assign the IP address as 192.168.10.1. 192.168.10.1, 255.255.255.0, 192.168.10.254. This is the gateway. Now we will select services. Here we are going to use AAA. Radius port is this 1645. Client name. This would be the name of the switch we will configure on this switch. Host name of this switch, in fact. Say we are going to configure SW-2. SW-2. IP address of this switch would be 192.168.20.1, and secret key, which should be same on the switch and on the server. I'm going to configure Cisco. You can create any other secret key here. Add. Now on this server I'm going to add this switch as well, which is SW-3. W-3 IP address would be 192.168.30.1 and Cisco. Add. And the username password, this would be the um, username password we will configure on the endpoints of this network. Here we will configure this username password. So I'm going to configure the username password. You can say root, and password is uh, anything. Radius @123. Add. And radius root @123. Here we have two different usernames and two different username passwords. So then we will allow EAP MD5. Our next step is to configure the network accordingly. I'm going to assign the IP address on this PC 192.168.10.10, 255.255.255.0, 192.168.10.254. 192.168.20.10, 192.168.20.254. 192.168.30.10, 192.168.30.254. Now I'm going to configure this switch. Enable config terminal, host name is sw-1, and this switch belongs to the NOC portion of the network. We can also perform the 802.1x authentication on this switch as well, but I want to demonstrate the 802.1x authentication on these two switches. Let's start. We will not configure 802.1x authentication on this switch, so keep this switch as simple as possible. um, Interface range 0 slash 0 slash 1 to 24. Switch port mode access switch port SVLAN 1. Now I'm going to configure this router. Now enable config t host name R1. Now I want to know the interfaces. Interface gigabit 0 slash 0 slash 0, no shutdown. IP address would be 192.168.10.254, which would be the gateway for this network. 192.168.10.254, 255.255.0, exit interface serial 0 slash 1 slash 0, no shutdown. Clock rate would be 64,000. IP address would be 1.1.1.1, 255.0.0.0. Now I'm going to configure OSPF on this router for the accessibility of all the networks to the radius server. So router OSPF 1, I have two networks on this router, so 1.0.0.0, 0.255.255.255 area 0, network 192.168 10.0.0.0.255 area 0, exit. Configuration of router 1 is complete. Now I'm going to configure the second router, second switch in fact. Enable config terminal, hostname SW2. Now I'm going to configure the IP address and a default gateway on this switch. So interface VLAN 1, no shutdown. IP address would be 192.168 uh, 20.1, and subnet mask would be this IP address. This is the IP address that we gave in the radius server. Here you go. This IP address, switch name, these two configurations has been done on the switch. Now we will configure the default gateway. IP default gateway 192.168.20.254. Interface range fast Ethernet 0 slash 1 to 24. Switch port mode access. Switch port access VLAN 1, as only a VLAN 1 is configured on this switch, so I'm using the VLAN 1. Now I am going to configure the router. Now enable config terminal hostname R2 interface serial 0 slash 1 slash 0 0 slash 1 slash 0. No shutdown. IP address would be 1.1.1.2.255.0 and exit interface serial 0 slash 1 slash 1. No shutdown. IP address would be 2.1.1.1.255.0 and interface gigabit 0 slash 0 slash 0. No shutdown. IP address would be 192.168.20.255.255.255.0. Gigabit Ethernet 0 slash 0. Serial 0 slash 1 slash 1 assigned with the IP address 2.1.1.1.1 and serial 0 slash 1 slash 0 is assigned with the IP address 1.1.1.1.2. So configuration on this side has also been completed. I have to give the clock rate on interface serial 0 slash 1 slash 1 clock rate 64,000. Done. Now I'm going to configure this switch. Enable config terminal hostname sw-3 and interface VLAN 1. No shutdown. IP address 192.168.30.1255255.0 and IP default gateway 192.168.30.254. Interface range fast Ethernet 0 slash 1 dash 24. Switch port mode access. Switch port access 1. Exit. Now I'm going to configure this router. Enable config terminal hostname R3 interface gigabit 0 slash 0 slash 0 and IP address would be 192.168.30.254.255.255.255.0. Exit interface serial 0 slash 1 slash 1, I think. Yes. No shutdown. IP address would be 2.1.1.2.255.0.0. It is done. Now I'm going to configure router OSPF one network 192.168.30.0.0.0.255 area 0 network 2.0.0.0.0.255.255.255 area 0. We have to configure the OSPF on this router as well. Router OSPF 1 network 192.168.20.0.0.2 area 0 network 1.0.0.0.255 dot area 0 network 2.0.0.0.255.255.255 area 0. Here you can see the neighborship with the router 1 has been established, and the neighborship with the third router R3 has also been established. Now let us check the accessibility ping 192.168.10.1. Not accessible. Ping 192.168.30.254. Why it is not accessible? I think I didn't. Interface gigabit 0/0/0, no shutdown. Now we will be able to access the Radius server. It is accessible now. One nine two one six eight 10.1. Now let's configure the dot one authentication on switch 2 and switch 3. Exit. First of all, we will enable the AAA new model. Now we will configure the Radius server IP address and the secret key. Radius server host 192.168.10.1 and key would be Cisco. It is done. AAA authentication dot 1x default group radius and dot 1x system authentication control. Now we will configure the interface, config terminal interface on which the system is attached, fa0/1. Authentication, port control, auto, and .1x PAE authenticator. Similarly, we will configure the same things on switch 3. First, we will enable the AAA server, then radius server, host IP address of the radius server, 10.1 and secret key. Cisco is done. AAA authentication .1x default group radius .1x system authentication control. Now interface fa0/1 authentication port control auto .1x PAE authenticator. It is done. As we configured .1 authentication on these ports, you can see the ports have changed their behavior, their colors, and now we will configure 802.1x MD5. Username was radius and root @123. Let me confirm. Radius root @123. Radius root @123. Now we will configure MD5 and root radius @321. As you can see, this system has already been authenticated by the radius server. Now let's wait for this one. Root radius oh, I gave the wrong username password, that's why it is not green. Let me correct it. 123. Now let's check. It is green now. You can say authentication has been done by the radius server. Now I am able to get the services and network services by the switch authenticated by the radius server. Ping 192.168.10.10. I think yes, I'm able to ping this PC. So friend, this is how you can configure the 802.1 authentication on the Cisco setup. Um, if you have any question or query regarding this lab, you can ask me. In fact, you feel free to ask me in the comments, and don't forget to like my channel, subscribe my channel, and like this video. Thank you.